Are turning on live, and here this is Richards Live presents You Be the Judge, and you are here at You Be the Judge. We are going on live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and also all your podcast channels. If you have any way, if you want to get to your podcast shows and you don't know how to get there, you can go to iHeart, you can go to Apple Podcasts, you put in Bridges Live, and it will pop, and then you'll see all the shows. Oh, there it is. I was echoing myself. So, thank you for joining You Be the Judge. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Paul Dyer. My other two distinguishing hosts is Marylin, Pierre, and Judge Claudia, Barber. Take it away, ladies.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dyer. It is such a pleasure to be on You Be the Judge again, and we have some fan favorites with us. We have Wilbur Freeman, we have Joni Washington, and we have evangelist Michelle Miner. And of course, our wonderful co-host, Judge Claudia Barber. Well, we're so happy to have her with us. And we have our special guest, Fatmata Berry. Woo!
Yay! Thank you.
Yay! Woo!
So,
and let me tell you a little bit about Miss Berry, the distinguished Miss Berry. Fatmata Berry is an attorney with over 18 years of experience. She has over 20 years of experience as a community and civil rights advocate and organizer. Ms. Berry is passionate and committed to fair representation in the law, the electoral process, and social and economic justice. Ms. Berry, who is an immigrant from Sierra Leone, West Africa, at the age of 11, earned her law degree from the University of Florida, Levin College of Law, and her bachelor's in psychology from the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. Ms. Berry is the owner of the Berry Law Center, practicing immigration and special education law, and the Law Center also provides consulting and registration services to nonprofits. Ms. Berry is currently the director of the Maryland Democratic Party's Continental African Diversity Leadership Council. The DLC is set up to ensure that continental Africans are civically engaged in the Democratic Party, that they are registered to vote, and that they are aware of the work the party is doing, and that they vote Democrat come election time. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest, Miss Fatmata Berry. Woo!
Hi, Fatima. Fatima, before you get started.
It's Fatmata.
Fatmata.
I just want to make sure that we're,
Fatmata.
Correct, exactly. That's it, Mary.
I have been to your home of birth several times in Sierra Leone, but here's the thing. You are working extremely hard to keep people engaged. Now, I know you're going to talk more about that, but that's got to be a task in itself just to keep people engaged.
Yeah, but it's worth it, and it helps everyone, right? It's not just like the people I talk to and the people I'm trying to engage. It helps everyone, because if we're all engaged, then we all benefit. The entire community, the county, the area, the people I'm serving or talking to, everyone benefits. So it's worth it. I think better than it used to. People are realizing the importance of it more.
And how is it beneficial to us? Why is that a good idea to keep everybody engaged? Because we're seeing a bunch of laws being passed nowadays. It seems like making it more difficult for people to be engaged, for people to be involved in the electoral process, for people to vote. So why is it that you think it's important that we do the opposite?
Basically, as you know, the old, proverb or very used proverb, which if you're not at the table, you're on the menu sort of thing. So if you're not there, you become the thing that is eaten, right? So it's sort of like, example is when we had the comprehensive immigration bill that was put forth during the Obama years.
Yes.
And during that time, we, as Democrats, just because I don't know if everybody here is a Democrat or not. As Democrats, we had both, both chambers, right? When it came time to pass this legislation, it didn't really happen. That's, at the same time, while they were having the conversation, the things that were easier to sort of negotiate away were benefits that benefited African nations, that benefited Black nations, but we're not there, right? We're not, especially back then, we were not in Congress. We had no seat at the table. So the voices that were heard were those whose immigrant benefits or immigration benefits were protected. They were not easily negotiated away. So that's just one sliver of an example that is like straight in your face. So yeah, that's why it's important, because the reality is your voice can only be heard if you're present.
Fatmata,
when you're speaking.
Fatmata, I've been in your country as a soldier. I've been in your country as an ambassador. I've been in your country as a human rights for United Nations. And the one thing that many people still don't understand about Africa is that it is a pot of everyone digging and taking out of, and no one's putting in. Now, your people understand that when they come here to the United States, but they work so hard, they get so advanced, they do so many things, and they try to support their nation and their diaspora, but yet it's still being drawn out from the political aspect too. How do we get that to change on all levels? Because it has to change, because regular people really don't know. I'm not sure if they care. I'm not sure if they just don't know anyone who lives there. They have ever been there. It's like, who knows about Cincinnati, Ohio, and the crime rate? Unless you know someone, does it really matter? And Africa is a lot of the same way. It's so far away, but we get so many things from it. We get so many minerals, ores. I mean, we can go on and on. So, but go.
Okay, so one of the things I've done recently during the election cycle, during the 2020 election cycle, was to create a Facebook page called Black Diaspora Voices. So this page is geared and centered to the Black diaspora, period. So that means wherever you hail from, if you're from any of the Black countries, whether on the continent, in the Caribbean, or your ancestors were born here as enslaved Africans, any part is to bring the voices together and make it stronger. Because the reality is this: any change that has to happen, it requires that all these voices become one and have a strength that otherwise you cannot have with just individual people. So, as you know, Africa is a continent. It's a huge continent. And we have many countries and growing, right? So 54 countries. And from all that, then just Sierra Leone, my small country, we have about 12 tribes, I believe. We have about 12 tribes within that one country. And so imagine the vast continent that it is. But I think that with more interest from the African American community, the Black American community, more interest in the continent will make a difference. I really honestly believe that the engagement between the continent and the Black Americans here in the U.S. and in the diaspora would help a whole lot more, because you only care when it's something that reflects you.
Right.
And the continent is all of us. That's where we all hail from in one form or another. Whether we got on a plane and left, or somebody went and shackled our ancestors and brought them here. But we all hail from there. And I think that connection is what we need to build. And that's what I've been working on. And I realized it was needed because when the page was created, the responses really, really, really encouraging. And I think taking it even outside of the Facebook page and hopefully soon bringing it outside as an entity would help grow it more and help build stronger voices. So I think our connections and our interactions and our ability to work together is what will make the difference. And that would then also work here, because everything starts with Black Americans. You can see everything that's happening in all parts of the world, and not even just the continent, based on what Black Americans do here for their civil rights and their right to survive.
Well, I'm from Haiti, so I always say that everything starts from Haiti because we won our independence first. So we were the first Black country who won their independence in the whole country. We're very proud of that, and we will not be displaced.
Right.
So exactly. Come over here to help you guys win your independence. Well, not you, but you Americans in this country. We came to help you.
Oh, there you are. Corrected.
Yeah, well, that's okay. That's okay. I'm here to, look out for my people. But anyway, the work that you do sounds so important. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Maryland Democratic Party, the Democratic Party's Continental African Diversity Leadership Council? Like, who is it made of? How many people are there? Do you guys have meetings? And how often do you meet? Is the public invited to your meetings? Things of that sort.
Do you serve food? Who cooks? Can I come?
Is it free? Do you have a piñata? Can you hit it?
Well, we all know anything African, there's food.
That's it.
So
do you have jollof rice?
Yeah.
What do you have? It's like
I know, right? I know. So the DLC, Continental African, is part of the Maryland Democratic Party. So the purpose is really to make sure that we engage African immigrant population within the state of Maryland and engage them as a party, as a Democratic Party. So membership is for Democrats in Maryland. And our job and my job as chair is to make sure that we do things like voter registration, voter education, voter engagement, those sort of things, and make sure people understand what the Maryland Democratic Party stands for, the work that the party does in the state of Maryland to push the African immigrant agenda, and an agenda that, includes all of us.
So why choose the Democratic Party as opposed to other parties? There's the Green Party, there's the Libertarian Party, there's the Republican Party. There are other parties.
Yeah, Claudia, and before Fatima, I know you're going to answer. I was thinking the same thing. I was actually like, but there's got to be a point. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, it wasn't like the group chose. The Maryland Democratic Party created the DLC to specifically engage different groups. So there's the Continental African, there's the African American, there's the LGBTQ plus, there's veterans, there's seniors, there's the youth, there's all these DLCs that have chairs that was created by the Democratic. The Republican Party wants to do one, they could. If the Libertarian, they could. And so members of that party a member of that party is then appointed by the chair of the party, in our case, by the chair of the Maryland Democratic Party. You're appointed, and your role is to engage other Democrats who are from whatever group you're charged with engaging. I'm charged with the continental African community within the state of Maryland. The chair for the veterans is charged with engaging Democrats who are veterans in the state of Maryland. And that's how it's broken down. So it's not so much that a group chooses one or the other. It's the party that created this because they want to engage all these groups within the state of Maryland to make sure that they're aware of the party. And, we're a big tent. And this is just an example of how wide the tent is, the work that's being done by the party to reach to all these groups or subgroups within the state of Maryland.
Sorry, Marylin. The question I have is, it's not. I don't want to be contentious between parties, but has the Republican people figured out that they didn't do it? Do they not care? Does the party not stipulate, like, that's a good idea, me too, we too should do this? Have you come across that at all? That's fascinating.
Can't answer that.
That's fascinating.
Republican. Yeah.
Well, now to add to that, though, there are segments I am aware of in the Republican Party, like the Black Young Republicans.
Right. Me too.
Segments like that.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that's out there to include Africans and under the Black Republicans umbrella or something else. I don't know that much about that, how that formulated.
Well, whether or not the Republican Party decides to engage them or not, what do you do to engage them specifically? Because I'm thinking that if I were going to look for them, I would, like, for instance, look for people from the African continent. I would go to my favorite restaurant, the Rainbow Restaurant in Gaithersburg, and speak to the owner, and he would connect me. And then I would pick up, the West Nigerian newspaper that they have there, and look in there and see what other restaurants are in the area. And I would do that. But what do you do? Where do you find these groups of people?
Well, I am very much engaged within the African immigrant community. So in different forms, in different groups and organizations, different attorney groups, different community groups, ethnic groups. So you have what they call hometown organizations, people from, like, say in my country, people from Konon, which is a section of Sierra Leone. You have the organization. So if you know the leadership, you reach out to them, you go talk to them and things like that. And online, I'm very engaged with many segments of the African immigrant community in the state of Maryland, and of course outside of the state also. Because the reality is, because of the way the African community is set up, I can literally engage someone in New York who would push me to somebody here.
Yeah.
That I didn't even know about here. So there's this huge interconnection that I use to engage people and be able to get more engaged and involved in this. And, there are a whole bunch of different WhatsApp groups. Every immigrant, and I think it's spreading too with WhatsApp use, besides just immigrants. But I know that for us, a lot of us are on WhatsApp. And a lot of us have WhatsApp groups that I have been added to, that I belong to, that I purposely got on, and some that I didn't, but I'm in it. But it's great. Yeah, that's usually how I find these people.
So a legal question, and does the African community feel like they are not well represented in the courts also, or in the judges, and how it is seemed to be a lopsided view, because there is a cultural difference and a cultural understanding of how to approach and talk to by police officers, by the courts themselves. So how do they feel when they get into the court system?
In general speaking, most that I'm aware of,
Did we freeze? Did she freeze? She froze. There, back, audio. She's back. Score.
I'm so sorry. I'm issues with my internet connection. I don't know what's going on today of all days.
It's the FBI. I'm telling you.
I thought it was the CIA. Not the NSA, maybe?
Oh my goodness, I don't know what's happening. So, what was the question again? If I remember.
Just how are the Africans that you help and work with? How do they feel about our court system, the legal system, and how they're approached and talked to?
Okay, so of course, there's a language barrier, but for many, especially those from what's termed as the Anglophone countries, they speak the language, they speak English. But there's also a cultural difference and an understanding of the self. So you find some who sort of find themselves in a situation where they agree to things based on an explanation that's given to them that it may not necessarily get, right? So you'll find people, for example, I'm an immigration attorney. So those who might have an immigration issue, and then they get involved in some of criminal issue, but they don't really understand that pleading to something, it may not give you jail time, but could still have you deported. And as a result of that, there's no real understanding of what's happening. And because they are around people who may not necessarily they push very well, they just sort of push it through. And that's one case out, and they go out the door and they feel great, and then they get picked up by ICE.
Okay, so
and
now
they're removable.
Well, now, Judge Barber and Marylin, you got to help me with this then. How can people, if they're not represented right or fair, not that, if they're not represented where they understood, how can they just push them out and then get them turned around, so to speak, and then get them deported without the person fully understanding? How is that possible?
Oh, that happens regularly, because just like Fatmata was saying in reference to the culture, some cultures you don't want to disagree with authority.
Right.
And so you go along to get along, and by the time you realize that you have given up too much, it's too late. Like, I'll give you an example following what Fatmata talked about. I had this man who called me. And he called me because I don't do a lot of immigration law. I only keep up with it just so I could help my other clients for the most part. And so he called me and he said that he was having a problem with his application for citizenship. And I asked him, well, what was the problem? He said he was living in New York with his wife. He moved down here. He's been down here for a while. When his wife filed for divorce, he had no problems with that. So he didn't think it was worthwhile to go all the way up to New York to respond and to do all that kind of stuff. So she got a divorce. She alleged that he committed adultery. And he's like, oh, fine, whatever she wants to say. If she wants to get divorced, whatever. Well, because she got a divorce based on him committing adultery, when it came time for him to file his citizenship papers, one of the questions have to do with moral turpitude. And so someone who has committed adultery, is that person moral enough, to become a citizen of the United States. And he had lots of problems with that. So not only, criminal cases could become an issue for people in immigration matters, but also civil cases. And what happens, to answer your question, Paul, is that once the person has agreed to something and the judge says, do you understand? And the person says, yes, I understand, even though they might not. And, they're too embarrassed to ask, questions of their lawyer. They're too intimidated by the judge. And so they just agree to everything. And then 30 days go by. They can't appeal anymore. They're just stuck with whatever it is that they agreed to. Okay, Fatma is shaking her head, so thank you very much. Judge Barber, would you like to add on?
Well, I think that the judicial system needs some improve. Well, first of all, the immigration system. There are so many immigration bills that are pending in Congress right now that they're trying to fix a broken system. And to the extent that it is broken, and when individuals are heard by immigration courts, there's always the issue of deportation, or what do you do with these people now that they are here? That tends to be a complex issue, and it's something that won't go away, largely because of the fact that people come to the country hoping that they can get here through asylum measures. So if the asylum measures don't work, or if they find that something went wrong, or they did something wrong, it could have major consequences that leads to deportation. But one of the other issues that I wanted to bring up is oftentimes there are differences, of course, among the African races, but Fatmata? Did I pronounce that correct?
Fatmata.
Fatmata.
Yeah.
Do you find that there is, I guess, a distinction between African Americans and individuals that emanate from any area of Africa, Sierra Leone, Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria? Is there some type of distinction? Do they try to distinguish or separate themselves by saying they are not African Americans?
Well, I think, So I think for many Africans coming to the U.S., there is, because I grew up here, right? So I came here, I was 11 years old. And I had, I always say I was blessed enough that I learned and maintained the African immigrant, the African culture within home, because that's what my parents did. But at the same time, they exposed me to the Black American community, because we've lived in white communities, went to basically almost all white high schools, and lived in all Black community. So I had I was able to experience all this simultaneously. But most African immigrants who come here don't all the time. And so they are not exposed to the Black American culture, the Black American life or experience, as some of us were in this country. So as a result, for most, they maintain who they are when they come here, majority of the time. And so their focus when they come here usually to make things better for themselves so they can go back and make things better for others back home, or send things over back home to things better for them. And because of that, yes, they maintain their culture and they maintain their identity. And I find the same thing within Black community, which is that, you know, I've encountered some Black Americans who don't want anyone to tell them that African American because they're Black American, right? They're not, they've never been to Africa. They don't necessarily identify Africa. So why are you calling me African American? But again, it's just, I believe, lack of exposure on both sides. I believe that once these two are able to interact and see how much alike in so many ways, there will be a difference in how they identify and how they interact and how they deal with each other and how they move forward in building themselves. Because the reality is, growing up here, like I tell people all the time, in Montgomery County itself, right? I live in District 20, at state level. I live in District 20. And in District 20, we've had, well, in Montgomery County as a whole, I think we've had 5 police shootings. And of those 5, I believe, I'm trying to remember all the numbers, 4 of them happened within my, which majority minority district. And I live out in White Oak in East County. And I think 1, 2, maybe 3 of those, at least at a minimum, 2 happened in my area close to me. Of those shootings that happened in the last, I think maybe in the last 10 years, maybe 4 were Black people, or Black men, young men. Of those 4 Black young men, 3 of them were African or African descent or first generation, 3 of them. So what I always say is, especially when dealing with things that really impacts the Black community in this country, the police don't stop and ask.
Nope.
Where are you, Black American or
African American?
Are you Black Caribbean or African? They do what they do when they come across a person. When they come across a Black body, they do what they do. They pull out their gun first and then they ask questions later. They did that with Amadou Diallo, West African. But so when you look at it, the Black experience, if we really take it as a whole, is all our experience.
Yeah.
Now, because we live here, right? Because we are here. So it's all our experience. And because of that, I think it's just a matter of educating ourselves, educating each other, and being open to talk to each other and engage each other, and really have a conversation about the difficult topics and be honest. It's going to hurt at first because there's all this understanding between the two groups, between the diasporans, especially African diasporans and the Black Americans. But you have to have it to heal, right? If you want to heal and build, that's what you have to have. And that's what I'm hoping at some point we get to, so that we can move forward and build a better us, a better and a stronger us.
Fatima.
Yeah. I'm so sorry, Paul. Hold your question, because I want to follow up a little bit on what Fatima said, because it seems that there's a generational difference. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, I came here on my 10th birthday. And to the U.S. on my 10th birthday. And I lived in New York. So living in New York, huge immigrant community. We were told we were told by people that we were better than the African Americans. It's like, look at them. They're living in the ghetto. Look how dirty they are. Mm-hmm. Look how poor they are. How come they've been in this country all these centuries? And they're still at the bottom of the rung. You definitely do not want to be there. Don't associate with them. Don't marry them. Don't, cross the street if you see them coming. Basically, we were told all of that. And then we got to the point where we started thinking for ourselves, going, wait a second, that's exactly what Fatma said. That is true. When people look at us, they might look at us and say, oh, okay, this one doesn't sound like, he or she was born in this country, but they have to get to that point. And even so, what difference does it make? And also, when some people look at us, they don't care where we're from. They just see, whatever they want to see in us, and all those bad things we were told about, about people whose ancestors had been in this country for generations. That's what other people were thinking about us. And so since we were in the same ship, we decided to stop having them divide and conquer us and just say, hey, let's do what we can to make this ship, to steer this ship properly, so that way we could get to our destination.
Well, I find from my observation that even in the judicial system, you have a situation where many times you might see, let's see, on a court television show, judge whoever, when they start weighing the credibility of Black people's testimony versus weighing the credibility of white people's testimony, it's a cultural thing. I've seen it over and over again. They will accept white people's testimony over Black people's testimony. I don't care if you're African. I don't care if you are. And if you're African, it may go the other way. They might accept it, an American's testimony over an African's testimony. It is a discrimination that is clear to me when I have seen and watched these court television shows.
Well, I've seen it with women too, because not only is there the racial issue, but with women, there's also the gender issue. If a woman says something, she sort of like needs to have somebody else who is able to say, oh yes, that what she said is true. And I'm like, what? So the weight of her words don't have any meaning. Okay, so now I've interrupted Claudia and Paul. I'm sorry.
No, because
Dr. Dyer.
Because what I've said to people and I've been in conversations when they say I'm not an African American, I'm Black American. I'm like, I'm from New York. I don't call myself New York Black. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to say you're from this city, so now you're going to start splitting up townships. I'm from Montgomery Black. I'm not Anne Arundel Black. I mean, so once you acknowledge that what they're saying is so disconnected, it makes sense to them. They go, oh, I see what you're trying to say. And then I'm like, okay, good, because every time you disconnect from something, that's the separation that the others need to keep you separated and kicked out and not in. That's just an acknowledgement. Yeah.
And just, the way the system has been built has been very much racially motivated, right? So the American system is built in such a way that the Black Americans are cut away from every other Black person or population in every way. So whether you're from the continent or you're from the islands, wherever it is you're coming from, you are told a certain story about the Black American. And so the Black American is left to stand here by themselves from everyone else, from all over.
But there's also colorism, where the darker you are, the more you're at the bottom more.
And that's, and the sad part is that's everywhere, even in Africa, right? So, and I'll tell you stories later. But even in Africa, you have the colorism, and it's unfortunate, but it's real. But the system, even within immigration, we a lot of times, and I've said it. We always say we need to fix the broken immigration system. But I think the same way we need to stop saying that the law enforcement system is broken. We need to stop saying immigration system is broken per se, especially for purposes of the Black immigrant population, because within immigration, the policies and laws that are put in place, issues that are discussed and proposed to move forward, majority of the time do not benefit the Black immigrant. Give you an example. We have what's called the diversity visa lottery. So the diversity visa lottery within itself, they allot certain amount of visas per country, majority of the time.
Right.
This was the exception. When they did the legislation for the comprehensive immigration bill, they gave a certain amount of visa availability for the continent of Africa and Caribbean countries and gave a certain amount for them. That number was basically equivalent to the numbers for Ireland. I'll say that again. Mm-hmm. The continent of Africa and the Caribbean have the same number.
The continent of Africa has 54 countries, right? Because you said that they had 54 countries plus the Caribbeans. Who knows how many more is that? We would say at least 60. Well, I'm sorry, at least 6 more. More like 16 more. so 70 countries basically. Mm-hmm. Had the same number as Ireland.
Yes.
I just have a quick question on that.
I'm sorry, Mita, what did you say?
I just have a quick question on that, because the diversity visa program, because being an immigrant, I'm being in this country for 20 years almost, I know that program. Actually, I think how they define that is how many people are from how many countries, I believe. Like, for example, I am originally from India. India has no diversity visa for India, because they define that there are too many Indians immigrant in this country, so there is no need for diversity.
So the entire continent of Africa make up in this country 4% or less of those immigrants in the United States of America, 4%. So it's, as it relates to that, it's not that, right? That was the original reason for the diversity visa lottery, was because there was not enough diversity as far as issuance of visas when it was originally put into law or legislation, because most people were coming mainly from Europe and Asia. They weren't coming from these other countries. And so they created the diversity visa lottery, which is exactly what it says. It's a lottery. And you file in a lottery, your name comes up, you get a notification, and you take the rest of the steps to come over to the US. But again, the legislation didn't go through, obviously, because we don't have comprehensive immigration that has been done. But just to give you an idea of the direction that things, and in currently, most immigration policies, basically for those who are being deported or refuse re-entry, are those who a lot of times were deported because of criminal reasons. And because the Black immigrant, just like the Black American, is profiled a lot more, is stopped by police a lot more, so is more likely to be engaged within the criminal law system. Because of that, they are more likely to be deported for criminal purposes. And because there's more of law or policy that stops people from coming back if they were deported for criminal reasons, the Black immigrant is less likely to be able to come back than others who may have been removed for other reasons. And today, although again, we are a very small percentage of the population in this country, we are disproportionately deported more than any group percentage-wise, not numbers, percentage-wise.
I have a question. Hello, Fatima. You say that you represent a large diverse group now, and you want to engage with the Black American. Is there any compelling issue that affects all the nations that the Black American can relate to and sympathize with, and just that you reach that connection there? Because just like you said, when you have an issue with the police, they don't ask whether you are a Black American or whether you are an immigrant. They just look at the color of your skin and they act accordingly. So in order to because there is empathy among all people, regardless of where they come from, if you find or have a compelling issue that affects all your diverse countries that the American person can relate to, I'd like to know what it is.
I have the answer. It's a bullet.
It's a bullet. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
That pretty much simplifies it all. A bullet doesn't know color. It just hits what it hits. Right. And it doesn't matter if it's a black person or a white person. So that unifies us all. We don't want to be shot mistakenly. We don't want to be killed because of an accident. We don't want to be killed because of your prejudices. We don't want to be killed for your biasness. The bullet equals.
Yes, it does.
That was my take. Sorry, Fatima. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, and I've been trying to think of the name of the person, of the Haitian who was the victim of police brutality a couple of years ago. Abner Louima, I think that's also a very famous case of police brutality up in Brooklyn. And I mean, they looked at him, they didn't say, oh, you're from Haiti, your people, were free for centuries before, well, okay, not centuries, for decades before the blacks in this country were free, so therefore we're going to treat you differently. They're like, no, And so, sure.
So that's a great answers.
I just want to say one more thing, if I may. So Indian American in US is 1.2%. I just checked in Google. So 1.2%, and India is the second populous country after China in the world. 1.3, 1.4 billion people. There is no diversity visa in India. I think that can also be added with African continent. I'm just saying as an input.
I don't know.
Okay, I think you're comparing a country with a continent.
Yeah.
So don't forget Africa continent.
Yeah.
No. I know. You are absolutely correct. But
so when we're talking about the diversity visa lottery, we're talking entire continent, not just one or two countries within the continent. We're talking about the entire continent of Africa.
That is a huge difference.
So from the entire continent of Africa is 4% of the population.
No, you are absolutely correct. And the other day I was watching a video. The South Asian, if you include Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bangladesh, that population will be more than African continent and Europe and Middle East. I'm just talking about the population wise. That's the only difference. That's okay.
Okay. Fatima, my curiosity is heartbroken when it comes to immigration. I've tried to read some of the immigration bills that are out there, and it's thick with garbage and a lot of. I'm like lost. I'm trying to figure out what is their intent besides to just say no. I mean, it's a lot of paper to just say no. We don't want to let anyone in that we don't want to let in. So, from your understanding, what could be better if you could do it yourself? How would you? Do you have an idea how you lay it out?
What do you mean how you lay it out? Like how you lay out the legislation or the issues
the legislation to have it better.
Yeah, because you talked about, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So Fatmata, I smiled before because it's Fatmata.
Fatmata.
Fatmata. So Fatmata, if you were at the table, how would you like to see the legislation? I think that's what Paul is asking.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of different legislations right now in place, and some of them have some good things and some bad things.
Okay.
So I definitely agree with providing path to citizenship for dreamers because, number one, they didn't come here on their own.
Right.
They had no choice in getting here.
Right.
And for many, like people like myself, this is all you know.
Mm-hmm.
So if dreamers were a creation when I first came to the US, I would have been considered a dreamer because I was here,
Right.
I was teetering and, all that stuff so I would have been considered a dreamer. And I think it makes sense because most of them who are here are educated, they are working, they have businesses, they have homes, they have everything that we would have, and they know nothing about their home countries. That's a tenet. But looking at each part of the world and the country and what people bring here, this country, we like to say this country is a country of immigrants, but we don't really live by it. We just say it. But when you look at the numbers, what immigrants bring to the United States, as far as taxes are concerned,
mm-hmm.
income is, you have to look at the numbers. Like, I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but it's amazing what they bring in, but they don't take out, right? Because
Right.
undocumented immigrants cannot take, they don't get Social Security and all that stuff, but they put in a lot of money. And so I think that at this stage in time, the part of one of the bills that requires those who have been here already 20 years to then again go through another 8 years before they can even think about moving forward to be legalized, I think it's a little extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you've been here for over 20 years, you've been working, you've been paying your taxes, and you can tell people are paying their taxes, then you need to let them go through and get what they need to get. The idea that somehow it harms the country is a fallacy. It's a huge fallacy. And the idea that immigrants live here and they just live such a great, fantastic life and they are making life easy is a humongous fallacy because that's not true. People work to the bone. Some of the hardest backbreaking work is done by immigrants in this country. And so give them a path to citizenship will not really change anything. They're already here. So I'm not sure what the argument and the debate is. They're here, they're living here, it will not change anything. And for countries that are trying to come here, think about the US participation in any destabilization of those nations, right? Because the US has relationships with certain countries and they have positive relationships where they have these visa waivers and people can come and go. Granted, they usually in Europe, but I think the US needs to take account of the fact that there are many countries where we contributed to the destabilization. So if you contributed to destabilization and now you're telling those people who are trying to leave because it's destabilized, no, you can't come, what does that say? So I would say take that into consideration as you're deciding nations that you want to give visas to.
I want you to finish, but I want to say I've been on the ground and been purposely used to destabilize areas in different countries. Purposely. So the United States has done it, will continue to do it. They do it for I guess I'm not that smart. I'm not allowed in those upper rooms, but they do it obviously for a reason. They get something out of. So
yeah. So if you're going to an area and you're getting things out, like and then you leave that area decrepit. What do you want the people to do? So when the people say there's a chance for them to come here to get some of what you have taken, then you say, no, you can't. That should be some form of consideration. But I know that will be difficult because we have yet to admit here in this country of what happened to Native Americans and what happened to Black people, to really truly admit and reconcile these two things. So I can't imagine that we will do that for, other nations of Black and brown people. But I think that should be taken into consideration when you're deciding on visa issuances, and not just your best friends' countries.
Do you think, and this is a question for all of everyone, do you think because we have not, like you said, Fatima, we have not fully really thrown up our inner guts to admit what this place has done to Native Americans, if we can't admit that, then everything after that, it just seems like it's going to just fall into the same hole. Because we're going to always keep pointing, you did this, what makes you think you won't do that to us or here or there? And they're like, so we won't do anything for anyone better anywhere. Do you think that's possible? You think that's a reason?
I don't know if, so you're asking the fact that we're not able to admit to what happened, truly admit, because I mean, you talk about it peripherally and whatnot, what happened to Native Americans, that is why we're not going to sort of admit about what happens out of the country?
Yeah, to immigrants. I mean, it's like if we cannot really truly concede what they have done and what they continue to do with the disappearing of kids and women and to Native Americans, I don't see how we're ever going to have a good immigration program when we've done so bad, when they've done initially so badly with Native Americans.
Yeah. I don't see that happening, because if you can't do it here at home, I cannot envision how to do it outside of here.
Very true. Very good point. Mm-hmm. And actually, I wanted to say one thing. The immigration judges, we have legislative, we have executive and judicial branch, but you must all know that immigration judges reports to DOJ. They are not independent, which is very unfortunate. I don't know why. So the immigration judges reports to attorney generals. And what I have seen in one of the videos, that they have a target that how many cases they need to dismiss or something. This is on the media reports, that they have a target they need to fulfill to dismissing cases.
Yep, and that's true. And there is actual advocacy going on to remove that from under DOJ, because it makes absolutely no sense. Immigration is supposed to be civil, not criminal.
Not criminal.
And it makes no sense that the top law enforcement, I guess, whatever judicial or arm of the country oversees immigration. They should not. They should not oversee the courts, the immigration courts. They need to be independent, because the reality is many times immigration, like USCIS, is basically self-funding, right? USCIS is funded by the application form fees. It's just it doesn't make sense, and it causes a lot of problems, because then immigrants are treated as criminals, which they are not. Detained immigrants are not criminals, even though that's how they're treated. But even though they're treated as criminals, they do not get the same benefits as criminals, meaning they do not get representation as you would if you were criminally charged. So if you're criminally charged in America, you have a right to representation. So if you don't have money, you can get it. But you don't have that right as a detained immigrant. If you don't have money to pay for representation, you will not have representation. And it's been very difficult to advocate for that. Even in areas where we are supposed to be so very progressive, it's been very hard to get that done. It's been a huge pushback.
You're taking off, Judge Barber. You want to say anything before you take off? Just goodbye?
No, goodbye. I've enjoyed meeting all of you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Hi, Judge Barber.
Bye.
And Paul, just to, I guess, answer your question a little bit further, it does seem like there are no groups that are safe. I mean, they started out with the so-called Native Americans, indigenous people, and then moved on to other groups. And throughout history, there's always been a group. We've had people here who talked about they moved on to the Jewish community. I know in New York, the Italians and the Irish, they talked about how they were, they were set aside and they were tossed aside because of who they were and where they came from. And nowadays, we're reading in the news, we see what's happening to the Asian Pacific American community. So it just seems like when you don't care for anyone except people who are exactly like you, you're constantly going to find someone to discriminate against. And that's why I think we need to, hopefully, we could teach the next generation that, just because somebody doesn't look like you doesn't mean that you need to discriminate against them. People are people. You don't see, a grizzly bear saying that I'm not going to be friends with this polar bear because we have different color fur. It doesn't make any sense to me that we are supposed to be such intelligent animals, yet when it comes to this issue, it doesn't make logical sense at all the way we treat each other.
I totally agree. I find it interesting that if we can't address the issues with similar issues that happen in this country throughout our history, if we were to make comments or address it in another country, that would make us hypocrites because
I would like to thank everyone. We're about ready to close out the show here on iTunes. You can catch us next week at 6 p.m. next Wednesday. Everyone have a blessed evening and have a good night. Good night.